Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jackson here from Titanic Games. Today we're going to be continuing on with our survival game series, and in this video we're going to set up kind of an inventory toggle as well as add some kind of cosmetic differences or changes rather to our inventory interface. So let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing that we're going to do here is come into our blueprints folder, core, and open up our survival character. So as of right now, the way that we're adding our, this ICE layout, which is our inventory, crafting, and equipment layout, is by pressing the 2 key, but we're going to change that so that we can use an input action event to kind of toggle whether or not it's visible or not. So we'll delete this 2 for right now, and we're also going to delete this add to viewport. Now with just this selected, we're going to bring it up here towards this part where it says, create game HUD off of event begin play. From here, we're going to drag off and connect it like so. So basically what we're doing here is we're going to be creating this layout, but we're not going to be adding it to the viewport yet. Instead, what we want to do is promote this to a variable so that we have a reference to it, and then we can add it and remove it as we see fit. So we'll right click on return value, promote to variable, and we'll simply call this, I guess, ICE layout ref. Okay, so now we're going to select this and then shift and select all of this stuff as well. And we're going to move it back so it's just not in the way there of all that other stuff. And we could probably extend this comment bubble over too. Just doing a little tidying up. Alright, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and compile. And we're going to go to our project settings now and add in another input action event. So we'll go to edit, project settings. We'll come down here to input and we'll add a new action mapping. Now for me, I'm going to call this just inventory. You could call it ICE or really whatever you want to call it. Just know that this will be what toggles our kind of inventory, crafting, and equipment. So for this, I'm going to choose a keyboard event. I'm going to go find I. The reason I'm not typing it in is because a lot of words have I in it, so it's easier to find if you just do it that way. So we'll use the I key, and we'll come back into our survival character now. We'll find some open space, and I'm going to right click, search for inventory action event. So right here you'll see under input action events inventory, it should show up. Now off of pressed, essentially what we're doing here is we're going to perform sort of a flip-flop, I guess, except a makeshift one. We're not going to actually use like the flip-flop node, but we will do something sort of similar to that with a branch. So what we'll do is we'll take our ICE layout reference and we'll get it. And what we can do from this is, since it's a widget reference, we can check if it's in the viewport or not. So we'll say is in viewport. And what this does is it returns, obviously whether or not it's been added to the viewport. So we can use that to determine if we should add it to the viewport or remove it. Okay. So we'll take this return value, drag off and do a branch. There we go. Just position it a little nicer. Okay. So we'll go ahead and handle the false part of this first. So off of false, right, this is telling us that it's currently not in the viewport. Now what that means is, we want to add it to the viewport because, we've pressed this button, so we want it to show up. So we'll take our ICE layout reference, we'll get it, and we'll say add to viewport. Okay, and we'll hook this up to, we'll hook this up to false. That's my bad there. Okay, so we've added it to the viewport. Now the next step is we need to remove the old UI. So we'll go under UI, get our game HUD reference. We'll take this out, we'll say get, and now we're going to say remove from parent. And the parent for this thing is, or for this widget reference here, is the viewport itself, so it'll just remove it from the viewport. Now we still have a reference to it, so we don't actually have to ever recreate it. Okay, so now that we've done that, the next part is we need to kind of change up our input settings, or rather how the input is handled, so that we can use our mouse with the inventory. So we'll right click and we'll say get player controller, because the player controller is basically what handles all the input. And we'll drag off of this, and the first thing we're going to do is say set show mouse cursor. And we want to set this to true, because if we set it to true, then we can actually see the mouse, and that'll be obviously helpful for navigating and doing things in our inventory. Then what we want to do is drag out and say set input mode, and we're going to set it to UI only. So this basically changes any of our input actions to, well, it only allows UI kind of inputs, so things like mouse clicks or certain keyboard strokes, etc., to be processed by the UI instead of having like the game respond to them. So like say you press the W key, which would normally be like to move forward, it wouldn't, move your character forward. That's what it does. So we'll do that, and that's all we have to do for the false branch. Now off of true, we're basically just going to do the exact opposite. Okay, so what that means is we'll go ahead and take this guy and we'll remove it from the parent this time. So we're removing it from the viewport now. For this one, we will add to the viewport, like so. And then we're going to take this part and just do the reverse. So we can copy and paste it up here if we want. I just did that by hitting Control W. It's a quick way to duplicate things. Okay, I'm going to move some of this out of the way here. Oops. Just to make it a little neater. I'm all about neatness and organization. So we'll take our player controller now and untick show mouse cursor, and this time we don't want to set input mode to UI only. We want to set input mode to game only. And now one thing I do want to say about this is that it does, obviously it depends upon kind of how your game works in terms of, how you handle inputs. Maybe you do want to be able to move around or something while also accessing the UI. In that case, you'd say like set input mode, game, and UI. It just entirely depends upon your game, but I would recommend just following along for now, understanding how it works, and then you can go back and do whatever you want to do. One last thing I forgot here is this set input mode UI only. We have to set the widget in focus, and so the one we're going to set in focus is our ICE layout reference. So we'll just get it, hook it up, and then finally for in-mouse lock mode, what I like to do is set it to lock always. So this locks it to the screen, right? So if I hit play really quick, we can actually test this out now. If I hit I, you can see it shows up and it locks it to our little window here. So that's my preferred kind of method of setting this up, but you can certainly change that if you want. So anyways, we have this. Now if we hit I again, oh, that's right, one thing I forgot. Okay, so here's a quick reason why we actually can't do the set input mode UI only. Because we currently have it set up to use a keyboard event, that I key, we actually need to have set input mode UI and game. So my apologies for that. So we'll say set input mode, game, and UI this time. We still have to set the widget in focus, and we still have to say lock always. Okay, we're not going to hide the cursor during capture. We're going to let it, stay visible. Okay, so that should have it working now. My apologies for that. If you did want it to only work with the UI, then what you would do, probably is add like a little X button or something, to close out of it. But it entirely depends upon your game. And one thing we might want to do then is disable movement on our character so that we can't move around. Okay, but well, we'll see. So anyways, if we hit I, it pops up. Hit I again, it disappears, and you'll notice that our game HUD disappears and shows back up, and everything is all still being kept track of. Okay, because that reference variable is still valid. It's just hidden, or it's removed from the screen. So there's no rendering cost or anything of it. I believe there's still a computational cost if you have something going on behind the scenes, but I could be wrong there. So if you know, feel free to correct me. So anyways, there is our inventory toggle. We'll go ahead and comment that out. Just say inventory, or rather, let's just say ICE toggle, because that will ultimately toggle the entire thing. All right, so we have this little toggle set up. Now the next thing, or rather the last thing that we're going to do in this video is do a quick little cosmetic change that will allow us, when we're playing in the game, to, when we hover over these, it'll change the background image so we can sort of see which ones we're selecting. Okay, So we'll go to our survival, or excuse me, we're not going to go to our survival character. We're done in there. We're going to come back out to content, go into UI, and we're going to open up widgets and open up our widget inventory slot. Now in here, we'll go straight to the graph. And what we're going to do is we're going to override some of the native functions that we have here. So if you click the override drop down next to functions, you should see that you have 32 different functions you can override. And these, some of these will be used when we do kind of the drag and drop functionality. So things like on drop or on drag detected, things like that. But we're going to be focused on sort of these mouse events right now. So the ones that we're going to look at are on mouse enter and on mouse leave. And what these do is they basically notify, they call these events whenever the widget registers that the mouse has entered it, okay? And then this one obviously registers when it's left the widget. So it's a really nice way to use events or like event-driven logic rather than using like an event tick, to constantly check if the widget is being focused or something or has the cursor hovering over it. So it's a little less, computational overhead there. So we'll do our on mouse overhead, or excuse me, on mouse enter, and then we'll also override on mouse leave, and they should both show up right here. Now all we're going to do is create one function that will basically handle both scenarios for us. So we'll create a new function. We're going to call this set hovered. We're going to add a boolean to it, and we'll call this hover ? And that will and we'll use this to determine whether or not we want to show a hovered kind of image or an unhovered image. So speaking of that, let's add two new variables. We'll call this one hovered image and this one unhovered image, and these both need to be changed to texture 2D references. So we'll take the reference, do the same thing here, texture 2D reference. We can make these editable if you want. If you want to change it inside the inventory layout or something, I don't know, but we don't really need them to be editable because we're only going to set them once. So for the hovered image, what we'll do is select this, and we're going to search for the hovered, the T slot square hovered. So if you've been following along with this tutorial series and downloaded the images from the previous one, you should have this. If you want to see what it looks like, this is all it is. It's a 64 by 64 image with I believe it's like a 2.5 unit, or excuse me, 2.5 pixel border around it, like a white border. Okay, so that's our hovered one. And then for the unhovered image, we're simply going to choose the unhovered version of that slot square. So unhovered, and again, this is just a 64 by 64 image. So we'll go ahead and hit compile and save. And now similarly to how in the event graph we kind of did this like set brush from texture thing, we're going to do the same thing in here except for our background image. So we'll take our background image, we'll get this, and we'll say set brush from texture, hook this up, excuse me. Okay, and then for the texture we'll drag off and we'll do a select. And people have asked me before, what is this select? Like, what is the equivalent of it in a, in like C++ or something? And I guess the best way to compare it is like this would be sort of a ternary operation or something, at least in this context, right? So if any of you are, working on this in C++, just be aware that's sort of how it works. Maybe I could be wrong, but that's just how it appears. Anyways, so basically, if hover is set to true, then we want to use the hovered image, and if it's set to false, we want to use the unhovered image. So pretty simple stuff, nothing super complicated here. We're just setting the corresponding image. So we'll come back out to the event graph. We'll go find these on mouse enter and on mouse leave. We'll take our set hovered function, and for on mouse enter, we want it to be hovered. And then for on mouse leave, we want it to, not be hovered. So we'll hit compile and save, and provided everything is set up correctly, it should work out. So we'll hit play, hit I, And now as we hover over these, as the mouse enters them rather, and leaves, it changes the background image there. So kind of a cool little effect. You can also do things with like audio, right? You could say like play sound 2D, right? You can play like a 2D sound or something. Let's go ahead and try that out. Why don't we? So we'll say select. Okay, you can plug this in. You could create variables for that as well, like hovered sound or unhovered sound or something. I guess you wouldn't really use like an unhovered sound, you just use a hovered one. So maybe what we'll do then is just choose like, what's something we can do? We'll just choose like the explosion, just for the hell of it. Press play, hit I, and now you may or may not be able to hear that. I can't remember if I had my desktop audio on. It might be super loud, so if it is, I'm sorry for that. But, you should be able to hear it. So anyways, you can see that's kind of a fun little thing you can do as well. But I'm going to leave that out. And I think that's going to do it for this video, guys. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you like it, like or subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.